Greetings. Today I want to introduce you to sentence diagramming, a way of analyzing sentences and sentence parts. Now, some of you may have heard rumors or something about sentence diagramming if you haven't done it before. But some of you may have done this before. And really, it's simply a shorthand, a quick way, a short way of analyzing sentences. And it's really a lot easier than writing out each word in a sentence and try to describe in detail its function. So, for example, here's the first sentence. Some of you may have done this before. Okay, if you were writing it out, what each word was, you almost have an essay just to analyze one or two sentences. Some is the subject, of is the preposition, you is the object of the preposition. The prepositional phrase modifies the word some. May and have are auxiliary verbs. Done is the main verb of the verb phrase, may have done. This is the direct object of the verb, may have done what, may have done this. Before is an adverb modifying may have done, answering the question when. Okay, we can do all that. But it's a lot easier in many ways to do a diagram. So we make diagrams to show the relationship of each of the sentence parts to the rest of the sentence. It has all the information, but it's much quicker to do, and is really not any more difficult to understand. In fact, for a lot of people, it actually gives us a better sense of the meaning of the sentence as a whole. And if you think about it, if you want to read well and understand what you're reading well, it helps if you understand the meaning of the sentence as a whole, if you can take in the whole sentence, or at least a phrase at a time or something, rather than just individual words. And the diagramming helps us think about sentences that way, and helps us analyze sentences, and it is kind of a shorthand. If you're using the grammar text in my class, you can find this on page 692 or page 730. Depending on which edition of the book you're using, and the chapter is called Sentence Diagramming Workshop. It doesn't have a chapter number like the other chapters do. Okay. Sentence diagrams always start with a main line, a main horizontal line. And that horizontal line contains the subject, contains the verb, and we'll find out later, contains most of the complements as well. Now, a perpendicular line bisecting the main line separates the subject from the verb. And the perpendicular line, I guess you say, is a transversal, as they say in geometry, right? It goes both above and below the main line. So the main line is a horizontal like that. And then there is a shorter vertical line that separates the subject from the verb. So in this short sentence, Jesus wept. Okay, wept is the verb. Notice when we analyze or parse a sentence, we usually start with the verb. And then Jesus is the subject. So that goes on the left-hand side of the main line, like that. And as I said, I just mentioned that for you in case you hear that expression. Sometimes someone is analyzing the functions of all the different words in a sentence and how they're related to one another. A lot of times we say that's parsing. It's not a term that I really use, but you come across it once in a while. Okay, now, in addition to the subject and verb, we have modifiers. Adjectives and adverbs modify the subject and verb. And so adjectives and adverbs and possessives that modify the subject and verb go directly below the word they modify, go directly below the subject or the verb, depending on which they modify, on a diagonal line slanting from the left to the right. Very, very slow, not a great diagonal, but slightly from the rest left to the right. So here is a sentence: the tall man slowly stood up. Okay, here we have the main line. We have the line separating the subject from the verb. The verb is stood. Okay, who or what stood? Man. Man is the simple subject. Okay, and notice the and tall both modify man. Notice that we always capitalize the first word of the sentence in the diagram, just as we do when we're writing out a regular sentence in English. And tall also modifies man. So notice, slightly diagonal, from the left to the right, but connected to the main line and under the word they modify. So slowly modifies stood. How did he stand? Slowly. And up also modifies stood. In what direction he stood up. Okay. So there you have basic modifiers, adjectives and adverbs, modifying the noun, or could be pronoun, I suppose, or verb that make up the subject and verb of the sentence. Okay, now, as you know, we often have modifiers of modifiers. If there's an adverb modifying an adjective or another adverb, or an adjective modifying a possessive noun, that word goes below and to the left of the word that it modifies on a parallel diagonal connected by a short perpendicular line. So let's say this is the main line. Okay, there's a modifier of the subject or verb on the main line. Then if the modifier itself has a modifier, then there's a perpendicular line slightly below it, a parallel line slightly below it, connected by a perpendicular like that. So it would look something like that. And here we have a sentence. The next door neighbor's dog barked so enthusiastically. Maybe not a great sentence, but it illustrates it. Okay. Here we have neighbors is possessive, modifying dog, and next door modifies neighbor. It doesn't modify dog, it modifies neighbor. And enthusiastically modifies barked, and so modifies enthusiastically. So show the diagram like this. Okay, the verb is barked. Subject is dog. Okay, the modifies dog. Neighbors modifies dog. And then next door modifies neighbors. Diagram it like that. Similarly, enthusiastically modifies bark. And then so modifies enthusiastically. So we do it like that. Okay. So the next door neighbor's dog barked so enthusiastically. That would be how you would diagram it. Okay. Remember, if we have an imperative sentence, the imperative sentence usually drops the subject, and we say the subject is you understood. Okay. In a case like that, you write you in the subject, but you place it in parentheses to show that it's a you understood. It's not actually in the sentence. So here's a sentence. Come here right now. We understand that it's saying you come here right now. Okay? And that, that you is the subject. Okay, so to diagram the sentence, have the main line and the vertical, separating the subject from the verb. The verb is come, oops, in the original sentence, I was looking at the secondary sentence. The original sentence, come is the first word, so the C is capitalized. You is placed in parentheses, because it's you understood. Here modifies come. Now modifies come, when, and then right modifies now. Right now. That's how you would do an imperative sentence. other special cases. If you have a sentence with an interjection. Interjections, if you remember, don't have any grammatical relationship to the rest of the sentence. That's part of the definition of an interjection. It expresses an emotion, but has no particular grammatical function. You put any interjections on a line above the subject, parallel to the main line, but with no line connecting to it. It doesn't connect to anything because it's not grammatically related to anyone or anything in the sentence. So, okay, if here's the main line, your interjection would go on a line above the subject, like that. So here are a couple, I'll diagram them on the next page. Whoa, look out! Yes, I understand completely. In this first sentence, whoa is the interjection. In the second sentence, yes is the interjection. Milder interjection, but still an interjection. Okay, so whoa, look out. Notice look out is imperative, it's command, so the verb is look, the subject is you understood, out modifies look, look where, look out. Okay, and then the interjection goes above the subject on a line parallel to the subject line. So, whoa, look out. Okay, yes, I understand completely. Very similar. In this case, we have the verb and the subject. The verb is understand. The subject is I. Completely modifies understand. Answers the question how. And then yes is the interjection. So it goes on a line parallel to the subject line above the subject, like that. And of course the yes is capitalized because it's the first word in the sentence. Yes, I understand completely. So that is how you would do interjections. Now there's another construction that also we use in sentences sometimes. It doesn't have a grammatical relationship to the rest of the sentence, and those are direct addresses. And a direct address goes the same way. It goes on a line above the subject, but without any connection to the rest of the sentence. So, John, come here. Okay, you know, you might look at the sentence and say, John is the subject. No. Come is the verb. First of all, if John was the subject, it would be John comes here. So you kind of know John's not really the subject. John is the direct address. You're telling John to come here. So again, this is an imperative sentence, and the subject is you understood, and John is the direct address. So, okay, come is the verb. You is the direct address. Here modifies come, tells, answers the question where, and then the direct address goes above the subject on a line parallel to the subject line with the direct address. John, come here. Now, here's an unusual instance, but it does happen sometimes. And again, you can see a pattern in principles here. If the direct address has a modifier, it sometimes does, the modifier goes under the noun just like any other modifier on any other line. So my friend, I do not understand. Okay, in this case, my friend is the direct address. Okay, so it's going to go above the main line on a line parallel to the subject, but friend is the main word of that, and my modifies friend, so that'll go on a diagonal under friend, and just like any other modifier. So, okay, the verb, notice the verb here is do understand. It's a verb phrase. And the subject is I. And not, of course, modifies the verb. Very significant modifier in this case. And then my friend is a direct address. Friend goes on the main line of the direct address because it's the noun, it's the main part of it, and then my goes on a diagonal, coming below the noun, below friend, because it modifies friend. So, but again, you see the same pattern though. It's not grammatically related to the rest of the sentence, so it's on a parallel line, but without any kind of line connecting it to the rest of the sentence. You might recall that sometimes the word there plus some form of the verb to be is, was, were, has been, have been, and so on, is an idiomatic expression. Sometimes there is simply an adverb modifying the verb. We say, there it is. Okay, you're pointing to there. It is there. Okay, but sometimes we say there is, or there are, or there were, or there have been, or something idiomatically when we're just talking about something, a relationship we want to establish. There are 3 2s in 6. Okay, there's no 6 over there or anything like that. It's just an idiomatic expression. So, and remember, with there are, there is, there were, and so on, that the noun or pronoun that the is or was, the verb to be, is talking about is the subject. So, there was a snowstorm yesterday. Okay. There was, here is the idiomatic, there was. Was is the verb, and storm is the subject. A storm was yesterday. Okay? So, that's how we would diagram it. And we would put the there on a line above the subject because it doesn't have any grammatical relationship to any other part of the sentence. So in the same kind of pattern exists. So, okay. Was is the verb. Storm is the subject. A modifies storm. Snow modifies storm. If you can, some people consider snowstorm a compound. If you wrote snowstorm as a subject, I wouldn't mark it off or anything. But anyway, this is how I'm doing it. Okay, yesterday answers the question when it was, so modifies the verb. And then there, because this is the idiomatic there, just goes on a line above the subject without any other line or anything connecting it to the rest of the sentence. Okay, so the idiomatic there plus the verb to be is diagrammed this way. But it does, and again, it does remind you what the subject of the sentence is. The subject is not there. The subject is, in this case, storm, whatever follows the verb to be. Okay, adverbial nouns. Remember adverbial nouns? Okay, adverbial nouns are nouns, but they modify, and so they act like adverbs. Some adverbial nouns express either time or place, answer the question when or where. So we have words like yesterday or today, which tell about time, and or words like home or something, which is a noun, but answers the question where. So now, what we do in that case, we try to keep our nouns on horizontal lines, but we have a modifier coming off a diagonal. So what we do here is we would have the adverbial noun below the word it modifies, but instead of putting it on a diagonal, we extend a horizontal out from the diagonal and put the adverbial noun on that horizontal. So let me illustrate this. Okay, will you still love me tomorrow? A line from a pop song in the 60s. Okay, tomorrow is an adverbial noun. It answers the question when, but it's a thing. It also answers the question what. Those adverbial nouns are diagrammed like that. So, will you still love me tomorrow? Okay, notice we have a change in word order because it is a question. So, the verb is will love. Notice we're going to capitalize the will because that is the first word of the sentence. You is the subject. I'm not going to tell you what to do. We're going to pretend that me is not there because the me comes later. I'm not going to talk about that yet. But, still, of course, modifies love. And then tomorrow would go on a line like that. Will you still love tomorrow? Okay. And pretend that me wasn't in that sentence. So we'll talk about that some other time. But you can see this is where the adverbial noun goes. Now, if the adverbial noun has modifiers, the modifiers go under the noun on diagonal lines just as any modifier would. So, okay, he talks all the time. Okay, time here modifies talks. When does he talk? All the time. Okay, but time is the noun. Time is the thing, but it's also answering the question when. So it's an adverbial noun. So here, okay, talks is the verb. He is the subject. H is capitalized because it's the first word of the sentence. Okay, and then time is the adverbial noun modifying talks, and then all in the modified time. Okay, so, and sometimes there are a number of possibilities that you could have with adverbial nouns that themselves have modifiers. Every day is a common one. He talks, he comes every day. So, anyway, that's how you would do that. Again, I think you can begin to see patterns. I might not have had to explain this, but I just figured I would to be helpful and kind of help you see the patterns. Okay. Pretty much the last thing I want to talk about are conjunctions. When we diagram sentences, conjunctions go on a dotted line. Now, conjunctions joining modifiers go on a dotted line parallel to the main line that connects the modifiers. So the young and frisky puppy finally stopped. Notice stopped is the verb, puppy is the subject. Young and frisky is a compound modifier of puppy. Both young and frisky modified puppy. And there's the conjunction and with there. We could say it without the conjunction, but a lot of times we say it with. So, okay. Stopped is the verb. Puppy is the subject. Probably have to make this a little bit longer. The modifies puppy. Young modifies puppy. Frisky modifies puppy. And finally, modifies stopped. Okay, and goes on a dotted line parallel to the main line, in this case, between the two words it's making a compound of, between young and frisky. So conjunctions go on dotted lines connecting the words they modify. If many times, of course, we have conjunctions joining compound subjects or compound verbs. If that's the case, then we split the main line in two, more than two, if there are more than two subjects of a verb, the compounds of the subject of verb, to form parallel lines for each part of the compound. So here we have John and Mary are going together. Okay. Now, are going is the verb. John and Mary is a compound subject. And of course, and would go on a dotted line between John and Mary, but it's diagrammed like this. Okay. We have the main line, but, and well, we'll write the verb. We usually do the verb first anyhow, are going. Okay, who or what are going? John and Mary are going. But we split the line like this, kind of makes sort of a Y with a horizontal extension. So, John, Mary, like that. And then the dotted line for and then together. Is an adverb modified going. Answers the question how. Okay. So, conjunction with the compound subject. You split the subject line, put each compound item on a separate line parallel to one another, and then a dotted line perpendicular with the conjunction. Same pattern holds for compound verbs. So here we have the frisky puppy ran and jumped. Okay, in this case, the verb is compound, so we split the verb line like that. Ran, jumped. Puppy is the subject. The and frisky. Modified puppy, and then the conjunction goes on a dotted line connecting the two parts of the verb, ran and jumped. Okay, see the pattern. Now this one we have a compound subject and a compound verb, so neither John nor Mary wrote or called. So in this case, both the verb and the subject split. Okay? So John, Mary, wrote, called, conjunction or goes on the dotted line. Now in this case we have a correlative conjunction, which has two parts, both neither and nor are a conjunction. So what we do is we write one on one side and one on the other of the dotted line. Neither nor, like that. Okay. So if we had neither nor, either or neither, either, depending on how you pronounce it, or both and, whether or, they would. Each word of the correlative conjunction would go on either side of the dotted line. Okay, but that's how you would do it in this case, where you have a compound subject and a compound verb. If there's a compound subject or verb made up of three or more parts, the main line is split into as many lines as there are separate parts. Normally the conjunction would go between the last two parts unless there were multiple conjunctions. Like most of the time we'd say John and Mary ran, skipped, and hopped. Okay? In this case you have three parts of the compound verb. Normally we would just put the conjunction at the end of the series. Sometimes people will throw in more conjunctions for emphasis or to keep the meter or something like that. But John and Mary ran, skipped, and hopped. Okay, in this case, once again, we would have the main line. John and Mary would be split the same way as we saw already. And in this case, there are three verbs, so we would, make the split look something like that. So there were 3 parallel lines for the verb. And we would say ran, skipped, hopped. Okay, and then in the conjunction on the dotted line. Now in this case, since there's just the one conjunction between the last 2 members of the series, we just put the dotted line between skipped and hopped, like that. Okay, and you could go on. If there were 4 verbs, or with a compound verb, or a series of 5 things in the subject, or something like that. You obviously split into as many lines as you needed, but that's the pattern. Okay, now the tricky thing with compounds really has more to do with the modifiers, because in English sometimes the modifiers modify just one word in the compound. Sometimes they modify every word in the compound. So here we see the boy and the girl ran away. Okay, very simple sentence. Subject is ran. The verb is ran. Subject is compound, boy, girl, and to me it doesn't make any difference which side of the dotted line you write the conjunction on. Whatever way is easier. I'm right-handed, so it works better that way. Okay, away obviously modifies ran, and then the first the modifies boy, and that's of course capitalized, and the second the modifies girl. That's the way we do it, where each of the compounds in the subject has its own modifiers. But sometimes modifier modifies both parts of the compound. You can say the boy and girl. In that case, the is modifying both boy and girl. So we put the on the part of the line where it's not split. Okay? And the same with the verb here. Quietly walked in and sat down. Now in just modifies walked. Down just modifies sat. But quietly really modifies both. They quietly walked in and sat down. So those would go on the part of the line that is not split. In the case of the subject, it would go after the split. In the case of the verb, it would go before the split. So I'm going to put the diagram on the next page here. Might need more room here. So, okay. Okay, everybody I think sees this. Compound verb, walked and sat. Compound simple subject, boy and girl. Okay, but the modifies both. So we put the on the part of the subject line where it's not split, because it's modifying both boy and girl. And then obviously we write the and on the dotted line. Similarly, quietly modifies both walked and sat. So we would write that on the part of the verb line before the split, showing that it modifies both. Now, walked in just modifies walked. Okay. Down just modifies sat. So those would go under the respective verbs they modify. Conjunction on the dotted line. But notice how this does show the relationship. And so it is important that you diagram these this way to show the precise relationship of those modifiers. Okay, one more warning. Beware of sentences like questions, which change the normal word order. Sometimes the verb comes before the subject or is split. Is it raining? Okay, is comes before the subject, and the whole verb is split. It is raining. Notice that grammatically, except for the fact that one is a question, one is interrogative, and one is just making a statement, one is declarative, grammatically, the parts of the sentence are the same. The diagrams are going to look identical except for the capital letter. That's why it's important to capitalize the first letter in the diagram. So, is it raining? Okay. Is raining is the verb. It is the subject. It is raining. Also, is raining is the verb. It is the subject. The only difference is the word order. And so we show that by capitalizing a different letter. That's why it is important in your diagrams to capitalize the letter. That way, again, you're making the relationship clear, and you're, in this case, showing us whether the sentence is a declarative sentence or whether it's an interrogative sentence, whether it's making a statement or asking a question. So, hopefully, you've learned a lot about diagramming, basic diagramming. Talked about diagramming subject and verb, compound subject and verb with the conjunctions, and also the modifiers and where the modifiers go in different circumstances. We've also learned about those special cases of words that aren't grammatically related, such as the direct address, the interjection, and the idiomatic there with there is, there are, there were, and so on. So, hopefully, you can begin to parse and diagram sentences now that you know these sentence